Hello and welcome to a wonderful another episode of A Talk with the Tolkienist. It's number two, and I have a very special guest with me tonight who is bringing a book with him. It's called The Tower and the Ruin. The guest is Michael Drout. You may have heard of him from amazing books like Beowulf and the Critics. He is one of the founding editors of Tolkien Studies. He is probably going to do a very special tour in 2027 on Imagining Middle-earth somewhere in the UK. He has so many wonderful articles, publications, and work on Tolkien to his name. I'm going to leave it at that. It's an absolute pleasure having you here, Michael. And we're going to talk about a great book that you're bringing with you. Hello and welcome.
Thanks, Marcel. And I should say that more years ago than I want to think about, Marcel came to Wheaton College in Massachusetts and spent a semester helping me with the Tolkien bibliography and doing his own research and coming to my Tolkien class and sitting with my 5 or 6 year old daughter in the Tolkien class because she was some kind of little antsy, and so it's just great to talk again. I mean, we've seen each other maybe a couple times, but that was more towards the beginning of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
20
absolutely.
years.
Absolutely, because I was trying to figure out when we last saw each other. It might have been like the Trinity College conference in Dublin,
I think that was
because
it. Yeah.
yeah, because I remember sitting in between you and Tom Shippey, and you two guys discussing the solution to a problem in one of the lines in Beowulf while I was having a pint of Guinness, and that was one of the best moments in my life. I'm absolutely sure because I didn't understand a thing. I just knew that I was in the presence of two amazing scholars talking about Beowulf in Ireland on in Trinity College, where you can see certain amazing books and Book of Kells and
hmm
other stuff, and essentially Ireland and Dublin obviously being a lovely place. I You may not know, but you remember one of the guys that I became good friends with, Trevor Paul, who was
hmm
also in the class. I met him after 18 years last year in Germany because
I
he's
saw I
now.
saw the piece you wrote about it, and he
Yeah,
talked about it too. Yeah, I'm still in touch with Trevor.
yeah,
He did a for his honors thesis. I was sort of his partial reader director for his honors thesis.
yeah.
My colleague Sam was the main one, and he wrote a novel called The Sword, and he's now published three
Three
more in
novels.
the
Yeah, yeah,
series,
yeah,
and
yeah.
he does self publishes it, does really well, has many people who are really into it. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah, that's the best thing is when I find that people that I know each other and work together and are friends like that. It's really just a great feeling. It is something about Tolkien, being aficionado of Tolkien, kind of creates fellowships among people.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the topics that I'm sure we're going to be talking about your book in a minute or two. But really, transparency note: 19 years ago, I had the chance of being, with Michael. At the time, I wanted to do a dissertation on the early Tolkien fandom, and I wanted to figure out whether it's possible to do it, whether I, could do it a couple of months stay in the United States. Michael kindly enough helped me to get a room with Wheaton College, and so I could visit all sorts of great spaces and places and meet wonderful people. The dissertation didn't really work out, but that's a my problem, not yours, definitely. But I realized that you can also you cannot only have a great academic scholar, but also a really great teacher and someone who, as you say, you are creating fellowships. Not
Mhm.
just by doing the classes that you're doing and the teaching that you're doing, but because all the many other things that you've been doing for the last 20, 25 years in the Tolkien fandom and Tolkien scholarship. I mean, how did you really go about Tolkien studies? I mean, you are insane. You're still doing this after 20 years or something?
I'm
Yeah,
very reminded of that because we had a real struggle to get volume 21. It took way too long because Verlin retired as editor, and we
yeah,
brought in Yvette Kaisor, who's awesome. But
yeah,
all of us kind of had to get used to working with each other, and there was just a lot of stuff, and I realized I've been doing this for a really long time. But I need to
yeah,
do it a little bit longer at least. I mean, I love editing Tolkien studies because
yeah,
I have an excuse to read, the some of the best work that's done on Tolkien. And in fact, well, I don't know if this is a privilege or not, but I get to read it 3 times because I get to read it when we, consider it for acceptance. And
Yeah.
then my role among the three editors is like the initial cleanup, edit, make everything into the right formats,
Yeah.
everything that we don't have to ask the author about, that's just fixed, then and then reread it again in PDF. So I feel like that, it's a great way to keep track of what everybody is
Yeah.
doing, and you can sort of feel the changes in the currents of research, without I don't know, having to go to a lot of conferences, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I sit here and all the material comes to
To
me, which is
you.
really nice.
Which is really useful. Yeah, definitely,
Mhm.
definitely. I mean, the conferences, obviously, and the places you can get together. I mean, I remember these major conferences, 2019 and 12 and 2005 in the UK, and obviously the amazing stuff that's being done in the States with the Mythopoeic Society, etc. So there are opportunities. I mean, you went to a long expected party to Alep. That's something that you are doing every year, right?
Well, they do that every 3 years,
Oh,
but
every
I've
3 years. Yeah.
been doing it. I think the first time was 2008 or nine. So
Yeah.
it's been like 16, 17 years, except interrupted by COVID. But
Yeah.
that was, I just kind of fell into that one. Like I got invited to give this to talk, and it seemed
Yeah.
very strange, I was like, I'm gonna go see what it's like because they seem really nice on
Yeah.
over email. And then I've now been friends with these people for like a really long time, and it's been I've had a lot of luck that way. Like I'm sure there I could probably come up with things that have gone wrong or been exploitive, but in general, I found that like when I
Yeah.
just kind of trusted people I didn't know, it all worked out really well. I mean,
Yeah.
Tolkien Studies was actually the reason Tolkien Studies got created is that I was, I'd been editing Beowulf and the Critics, and
Yeah.
it was with the publisher, and they sat on it for 2 years. I won't get into how silly that was
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
missed the Fellowship of the Ring movie, having it come out with that, and then
Yeah.
they basically missed the Two Towers. And when it came out, they only published 300 copies, so it was sold out in a day. And then by
Yeah.
the time there were more copies, everyone had forgotten about it. But
Yeah.
anyway, while that was going on, I got an email from Doug Anderson, who I'd never met, but I knew his
Yeah.
name from the annotated Hobbit right there,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and he's like, I know you probably are, you can't let me see a copy of Beowulf in the Critics because the Tolkien estate and this and that.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, but I'm trying to do a new edition of The Hobbit, and I really like to see if there's anything relevant. I didn't know this guy, but I really liked his work, so I'm like, he's probably honest. So I just sent him the whole thing. Like, if you could put it up on, a torrent site or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But because of that, that, and then we became friends because obviously he didn't do that, and he gave me great, feedback. And then in the fall of 2001, we're having a phone conversation about Tolkien. I don't remember why we were having a phone conversation,
Yeah.
and he said, or maybe it was on email, and he said, "I've always thought that we should have a journal called Tolkien Studies because." I was saying I was frustrated that myth lore was really high quality, but it wasn't only on Tolkien. And
Yeah.
Malorn was only on Tolkien, but back then it was very uneven compared to where it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah. Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there just wasn't a just Tolkien and also high academic quality journal. And so Doug said, I think
Yeah.
we should. I've always wished there was a journal, and I'm like, well, like a total idiot, right? We should found it. I'm a brand new assistant professor. Like we should just found it. How hard could that be?
How
And,
hard can that be?
yeah. So he's like, well, if we're gonna do this, we need to talk to my friend Verlin. And
Yeah.
so we set up a conference call, and the three of us decided to go with it. So we started soliciting articles, and we figured, again, wrong, but we figured
Yeah.
that like, if we create the first issue, and then we go to a press and say, look, do you want to publish this? So we spent like a year and a half or more getting, people, like we would write to people like, or use friends. So I wrote to Shippey, and she asked Carl Hostetter,
Yeah.
and Berlin asked, Gergely Nagy, and we got the first volume, which is kind of slim, and it didn't have a ton of material in it because we were just getting started. So we'd solicited all these articles, and then we went to Kent State University Press, and said,
Yeah.
"Hey, we've got this journal on Tolkien," and they're like, "Oh, we're not interested." So we're like, "Oh, what are we going to do?"
Okay.
So we then tried to approach Greenwood, who had done the Legendarium. They weren't
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah.
We couldn't find, and so now I'm like, okay, great. Now I'm going to be like publicly humiliated, having accepted articles for a journal I can't publish. We're going to have to publish it ourselves. And
Yeah.
so I spent like a couple months in the summer learning how to do layout and design,
Oh no.
and actually laid out the whole first volume and everything. I deliberately made it look like kind of stodgy old medieval journals from Oxford because I figured that would have more authority,
Sure.
and I had this all laid out. And then I went off to the International Society of Anglo-Saxonists conference, which
Yeah.
was in Tempe, Arizona in August, which was about what you'd imagine the weather is Arizona in
Yeah.
August. But there's like a reception and everybody's standing around, and I end up standing next to Pat Connor, who's a professor from University of West Virginia. He
Yeah.
had helped me on some of my dissertation stuff because he worked on the Exeter book. So we knew each other. We'd gone drinking and whatever. And he's telling me, I just became the head of West Virginia University Press. And you would not believe the weirdest thing that I've discovered. He's like, what I found out is that we don't make any money on the books we publish. Those are all break even at best. The only thing we make a profit on are the journals that we publish. And so I said, do you want another one? And then this is how long ago this was. I reached in my bag and pulled out the CD-ROM that had Tolkien Studies
No.
1 on it and handed it to him. And that's where it all started. So there was no plan, or the plan was
Yeah.
a dumb plan, and it almost crashed and burned. And then there were bunches of other hiccups there. I mean,
Yeah.
you notice if you look at the whole run of them, there's one that's very small, and
Yep.
that's when like Doug just he had good reasons for like, I don't want to do this anymore. And we didn't
Yeah.
have a third editor, and Berlin and I are trying to figure this out. And then we got David Bratman to come in, and
Yeah.
so there's been and there was big drama at West Virginia University a few years ago when the state cut their budget massively. And so there's always I find that every single volume there's never one that goes smoothly. There's always some new thing. Like there's, oh, the year's work. The three of the contributors didn't turn it in and now aren't answering email. So now
Yeah.
we have to like David has to write that himself. Like there was a lot of things like that. But we've got 21 volumes out, and we now have all the essays for 22 in hand. So just keep going with that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's like the university presses can have a problem. The printing press can have a problem. I mean, there's so much. We
Hmm.
recently did an episode with some small print publishers with my German Tolkien podcast, and they are telling horror stories of what everything can possibly go wrong, right?
Hmm.
So it's just insane. And to have a journal run and work for more than 20 years, congratulations on this. And you've made, Tolkien Studies obviously it's one of the best things out there, and it's really something everyone is looking forward to. And to have your name in the Tolkien Studies, thanks to you, even I managed to get in there once together with Rebecca at the time doing the
Hmm.
bibliography and stuff. That was just an absolutely amazing, what absolute pleasure and privilege to be there. It's just wonderful to see that by these coincidences, that is something that is an experience that I've been having with the Tolkien community. You talk to people in the oddest of circumstances, and things just somehow happen. It's
Hmm.
just insane. It really is that
Yeah,
good
it
luck.
is. And you end up with like lifelong friends, or you end up doing work that you never expected that you'd work on. I and that's and it's sort of, I mean, the same thing with the Tower in the Ruin, um,
Yes.
which was W. Norton. So it's like with a real like a commercial press, which I've never worked with in all the volumes and books and essay whatever I've published. I never worked with a
Yeah.
commercial press before.
Yeah.
I have to say it's been a great experience, not a bad one at all. Like I
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had an editor as good as Dan Gersel. I mean, because what he seemed to be doing was trying, like, so I think academic editors tend to be either gatekeepers or cheerleaders, right? So they're either like, I will make sure I don't let anything bad get through here, which is important. I totally agree with that. I mean, it
Yeah, yeah,
stinks
yeah.
when your gate kept out of it, but I get it. We unfortunately have to reject a lot of articles that are submitted to Tolkien studies, if they just, usually because the person writing them has not read any Tolkien scholarship, and so doesn't know
Yeah,
that
yeah.
they're just doing something that somebody else has already done and deserves credit for doing. Um, but also, we seem to get a bunches of papers that, like, someone who's a really smart undergraduate wrote a good term paper, their professor says send it to Tolkien studies, and it's not a journal article yet. It's a nice insight. But so anyway,
Yeah.
I understand that. And the cheerleader thing is nice, where they're saying like, "Oh, this is great. I can't wait to publish it." But I finally had an editor who's like trying to make it better, but keep it like not turn it into his own voice, not,
Yeah.
say what he wanted to say. And it was a great experience. I mean, the book is so much better than it would have been. And I mean, he made me cut a whole chapter, among, because I signed a contract for 120,000 words and I delivered 167. Um, so, there had to be some cutting, but he
Yeah.
made it better. And in the end, like, he pretty strong hand, edited with a pretty strong hand the final, like, 4 or 5 pages. And again, I was like, oh wait, I don't want to cut that. And then I look
Yeah.
back and I'm like, yeah, I needed to cut that. So it's been a great, experience. And I keep finding Tolkien fans and Tolkien fanatics, even, like, everywhere, like the people you don't expect. Like,
Yeah.
somebody who's a, editor for the New York Times, who I've talked to, somebody who's, something is going here. It's like, oh well, my dad is a huge Tolkien, fanatic, and I'm like, oh, where does your
Yeah.
dad work? And he's like, oh, the what was it, the National Institute of Health. He's a physician. So, like, you find
Okay.
out that it's everywhere, and it's of course very, very
Yeah.
mixed, because everybody, regardless of your, like, political leanings or whatever, people love Tolkien and
Yeah.
they think Tolkien's on their side no matter where they are. I talk about this in the book a little bit,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
so, and it's also just kind of exciting to see, like, that people are willing to, like, make their inner Tolkien nerd public. And that's, how many people I met who say things like, well, I don't know, when I read Appendix A, and I'm like, oh.
That's one of those things. I mean, you never expect it, and it's often in occasions when you least expect it. It's really the range of interests and people, background, ages, genders, whatever you want. It's We are everywhere. I mean, I don't mind, obviously, because me being, a founder of a Tolkien society, the one in Germany, and trying to organize things and events all over the world, more or less. It's just you get so lucky because
Hmm.
when you do an event and you need, I don't know, you need some tech, or you need someone to do the printing or the press, or someone do a little pamphlet or whatever, and you always just ask around, and then someone says, well, actually, I have a little printing studio and maybe I can do something, or I'm an artist and I can do like the design for stuff, or
Hmm.
anyone who brings in, someone says, I'm actually in a live action role playing group and our specialty is sword fighting, so we teach easy sword fighting techniques. Yeah, I know. I was trying to get that into. I tried to get that into the screen in this particular case. That is absolutely lovely. There you go.
I'm trying to
You
get the
see, you
focus.
see, you're almost as bad as Thomas Honegger, because Thomas Honegger has his full armor because he's a historical reenactor. So the stuff that he has is historically correct, including the sword. And it's medieval studies where you go into the room of your professor asking questions about your term study, whatever topic, and he has like a full armor with a helmet
Yeah,
and the sword on his head.
I can't compete with full armor. I have that, and then, a seax.
Yeah.
that though
Oh,
this is
lovely.
going back to, so what happened is, one of my former students, Jamie Lundell,
Yeah.
won an episode of Forged in Fire and has his own swordsmithing studio.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I apprenticed myself, sort of. I mean, I didn't do any of the skilled work. My job was like, I don't know why my camera just zoomed in when I made that hand gesture. I guess it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
got some um, weird tech thing there.
Ooh. Oh, very good. Very good.
Um, but he he let me like hit things with a sledgehammer and
Yeah.
put the hot metal in and out of stuff, but he did all the the actual beautiful craftsmanship. But so
Yeah.
we did that project, and then just this semester he came to Wheaton and he made this
Yeah.
in front of the
Fantastic.
students and
Yeah.
let them come up and help. And it's a great experience. So yeah, there, and I know people, because of the Tolkien thing, you end up running into people who make
Yeah.
clothing. I That the ALEP thing, they gave me a hand
A full
woven
gap.
tunic,
Yeah. 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 I
and
saw that.
people do it's great, and I will say it's something about, so I've consulted for Lord of the Rings Online for like
Yeah.
17 years. I mean, not paid, not official, but like that's who I
Yeah. Yeah.
when
Yeah.
one of the designers wants to check something, like they ask me, and I've gotten to do some cool things. Like I wrote a couple poems for it in Old English and stuff. But anyway, what they say is that the people who play Lord of the Rings Online are the nicest, most generous community of people in any video game, that or
Yeah.
any MMO, anything like that that they know of. Like people are genuinely nice to each other, and it's got to be. I think it's a combination of who's attracted to Tolkien,
Yeah.
and if you enjoy it, the reading. It's I think it's hard. I mean, I think it'd be hard to really, the Lord of the Rings is your favorite book ever, so you're going to go out and do evil things or abusive. I mean, obviously people can,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think there's something about it, because they're like, even in their, they have a section of the game that's player versus player, where you just
Yeah.
go up into the Ettenmoors and beat on each other, and
Yeah.
even
Sure.
there people aren't really obnoxious. I mean, the one story I've heard multiple times, but I've never been able to like to lock it down in writing,
Yeah.
or I
Yeah.
would have cited it, is that one of the regulars, player versus player, died in real life,
Oh,
and
yes. I
they
heard.
had held a funeral for him in player versus player, where like anybody could stab the other person but what happened is all these high level characters came and like guarded, but people made this gigantic avatar procession. And
Yeah.
I just don't think that, like, I mean, all fandoms are good to the people inside the fandom,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there's
Yeah. Yeah.
something special about the Tolkien world, and it's his vision of human beings and human goodness, and celebrating the good, without ignoring the evil, and without saying that the evil is just really imaginary or doesn't exist, or they're just misunderstood. It's more more complex than that, and I think it just does attract good people.
It is
And me.
absolutely. I mean, it's hilarious and incredibly interesting to think that Lord of the Rings Online is the segue into your book, because you've basically just mentioned something that is really
Mhm.
essential to the story that you are telling and the work that you're doing with your book. It is, as you said, all the fandoms have absolutely amazing and great people, and they do a lot of work. But it is quite interesting to see how much of the materiality and the craftsmanship that attracts so many people. Doing smith work or doing clothing and all of these things, and being there for each other, appreciating each other and supporting each other. On Lord of the Rings Online is a really wonderful game, but it's not Warner Brothers, and it's not really EA, and it's not
Mhm.
Blizzard, and it's not like we're selling millions of copies each and every year.
Right.
It is only going because there's a community of people believing in the work that's being done with Standing Stone, and they're keeping it running. That
and
is
and
dedication.
it's because there's this desire to go to Middle Earth. Um,
Yeah.
but it's a weird desire. This is the chapter I had to cut out, so now I can talk about this. The weird desire is, we want to go to Middle Earth.
Yeah.
That's not that unusual. I mean, I wanted to go to Pern for reading Emma Caffrey books. I don't think I want to go to Westeros. Because
Nah.
even if you're at the top of the hierarchy, it's not a good place to be. But Prydain, Earthsea, I would love to. So it's not like
Oh
that.
yeah.
It's unique to make a place people want to go to. What's weird is the place that people most want to go to is the Shire, which is just rural English countryside. Like you can sort of go there now. It'll look like the Shire, but we
Yeah.
desire that, and we desire that intensely because it's this beautiful vision of a a community of hobbits. The way that hobbits work is no hobbit has ever killed another hobbit on purpose in the history of
Nah.
the Shire, right? The Shire Reeves are more concerned with the straying of beasts than a straying of men. And yes, obviously it's in the fantasy genre, right? So that Frodo and Bilbo don't have to work. They're some kind of landowning
Yes.
aristocracy. But Sam and the Gaffer, they don't mind at all. They're happy, and Bilbo taught Sam his letters, not meaning any harm, and so there's something. It's not just the physical description, as beautiful as that
Yeah.
is, and it's not just the Hobbit holes, as amazing as they are. Like I could become so rich if I had the rights to set up retirement communities that look like Shire Hobbit holes.
Yeah.
Um, but architect tells me there's some technical problems there, but they probably could be solved. But we want that so much, and we make things. I mean, again in the chapter I cut out, I talked about that when I was in it was either junior high, maybe early high school. I was playing paper. This was the first wave of paper and pencil Dungeons and Dragons, and I was a dungeon master, and I was making these modules and things. But
Yeah.
I would make stuff. I never understood why there wasn't Lord of the Rings stuff in Dungeons and Dragons because that seemed the most obvious thing. Why
Yeah.
is there no Balrog? Why? And then I found out, of course, lawsuits and all that.
Sure.
But I made like maps, or I made like a drawing, like the Moria Gate, and then I put lemon juice on it and baked it in the oven to make it look brown. And in fact, I ironed it with my mom's iron, and then I didn't clean the iron, and then
Oh
she ironed
no.
a blouse. I think that was the last time she hit me. And I kind of deserved it for that. It's like lemon juice is not coming out of a white
Not.
blouse. That was the end of that.
No. No.
But so we made even then I was
Yeah.
making things. I was doing drawings of what I thought the Elendilmir or the scepter of Animinus looked
Yeah.
like, and so many people do that. Obviously, the movies gave a push, but again, think about the movies. Like most before Peter Jackson, a lot of Hollywood movie prop stuff was schlock. It was junk. It was like whatever looks good for 3 seconds on a. They went
Yeah. Yeah.
full on like the sewing craftsmanship and the details. I mean, I saw the display of the prop objects.
Yeah.
So there's something. Again, it's like, and maybe it's you want to put it in the Tolkien mythology or whatever. It's why Owlette and the Noldor are so appealing. They want to make beautiful things. I
Yeah.
mean, and the problem is, and this is the opposite of Tolkien studies, because people make beautiful things and give them away, as opposed to making beautiful things and coveting them away for themselves. And
Yeah.
so I think that's like there's this desire to go there. The people who play Lord of the Rings online, I mean, they're sure they like the game aspect and but they're going to look at Middle Earth and to
Yeah.
walk around in these places and then to see the things that he never even describes, like what does Dal Amroth look like, or I wanted to see that. I wanted to see what Dal Guldur looks like inside, um,
Yep.
and yes, it's somebody else's, it's not Tolkien's imagination there. His probably would have been better, but or it would have been unexpected. He's every time that you find something he comes up with later, it's more complicated or
Yeah.
more original than what I had been or anybody had been thinking. But so yeah, there's that like desire to go there and
Yeah.
to have it to make it real in some way. I don't like real because you get with realism and whatever, but
Yeah. Yeah.
true might be the better word. There's a deep truth to it, and it's a truth that goes beyond like. Okay, so here's why I'll clear that up. Realism seems to me to be about making something look as much like our world as possible, or describe it as much as. And I know it's just a set of narrative conventions, et cetera.
Sure.
But when we talk about realism, that's what we mean, right? We mean like I remember when Star Wars first came out, and people were like, oh look, there's like smoke exhaust markings on the spaceships, and there's beat up, they look worn and they look used. So that's
Yeah.
okay. That's realism. Um,
Yeah.
Tolkien is trying to be true instead, because it's something that's like better than our world. In fact, our world is sort of a almost like doesn't quite reach the heights of Middle Earth in terms of crafted things, in terms of
Yeah.
the Hobbit holes and the House of Elrond or Lothlorien, and but yet it doesn't feel at all fake or
Yeah.
Hollywood or prop like. It feels more true somehow, and that's an amazing achievement. There's not many works of literature you can say that about. I mean, they weren't trying to do that for one thing,
Yeah.
but it's that was another thing in the book. It's just like it's so everything is so weird. We take it for granted that we reread these books a million times, that we want to read them
Yeah.
to our children, that we can have an opinion about like what is in the gaps, or what did the cats of Queen Bruthiel really do, or like all of that is
Yeah.
we take it for granted now because other people copied Tolkien, developed on Tolkien, um, but it's very weird from a literary point of view. Like from a literary scholar, it's like, oh wow, this book does all these things that no other book in English did, and that's I think that's exciting because then it gives you a chance to figure out like how it works. Maybe I don't know how well I did that. I tried.
Well, the thing is, what one of the things you mentioned also is this which is obviously experienced doing the Tolkien classes that you're doing at Wheaton College, is that people seem to be coming, even to this very day, to 2025. People are saying someone read The Hobbit to me, someone read The Lord of the Rings to me, or The Silmarillion, and I just had to really like grin, because when I started out with the Tolkien Society at 98, more than 25 years ago, one of my best friends from school was the editor to our fanzine. I mean, it wasn't as flashy and modern as it is today, and four color printed, whatever. But his oldest daughter is now together with him, because he's always done the tech on online shows, now in hybrid conferences and whatever. His oldest daughter, who obviously he read the stories to as well, is now a member, like an active member of the Tolkien Society, and she's doing that stuff. I mean, she's making fun of her father for being like that silly Tolkien fan, but
Hmm.
she's with the society and she's doing all this work. And that really started out, it's like, I don't know. Is it a youth program, whatever it's going to call? It's like going to camp. It's like
Hmm.
Tolkien, Tolkien summer school, and it just goes on. And the people that I know, just as you said in the book, I know people now who are like in their 20s, early 30s, raising a child, planning on having a family, and everyone is saying, "I'm going to read that book to them." The first
Hmm.
thing I will do when they're like at least 6 months old and they can sort of like listen to my voice. I can do it earlier, but I think 6 months is a good time. I don't know why, but obviously for parents, it has to
Hmm.
be like this. And they just start doing that. And that is for a number of reasons that you are going into in the book as well.
And I think that like so. I think so. What I try to make an argument about in the book, and this is probably I don't know, it'll be the most, if anyone outside of Tolkien things reads it, this will probably be the most controversial point, because I
Yeah.
don't try to prove it. I deliberately said that. I'm just, you know
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
Because I don't know how you would actually prove it. But it's the sense that a lot of people, or maybe I'll just say that I have, because I
Yeah.
can definitely tell you what I feel, and then I can guess what other people feel only, is that when I pick up The Lord of the Rings and read it, it feels like I'm having some kind of experience rather than just I'm reading another book. Especially, of course, the first time of what when my father read it to me, or when I read it to my kids, that feels like you're having an experience.
Yeah.
And um, and I know, and you've been involved in like the documenting people's Tolkien experiences, and how they,
Yeah.
whether it's how they interact with the Hobbit, or how what brought them to Tolkien. And so there's a lot of people who feel the same way, that the book
Yeah.
is important to them. So I said, assuming that's true, and of course I think
Yep.
literary scholars say, well, it's not true, so that you're done. Well, okay, fine. But assuming that's true,
Yeah.
well, so how does it do that? And I tried to answer the how in like a couple ways. So how, just like how historically, literary historically, did Tolkien come up with it? Because
Yeah.
he did not, like, I'm sorry, Humphrey Carpenter, he did not suddenly have, like, I was talking with the TCBS friends and we're like, I'm going to make a mythology for England.
Never.
And the
No.
way to do it is to, compose the Silmarillion for 30 years and then write a children's book that isn't really in the world but sort of is, and then the Lord, like, no, that's not how it
No.
happened, right? But so what I think did happen is that Tolkien, as he'd been when he was a student at Oxford and at King Edward School beforehand, he had felt that there was this something in the air, his words, of
Yeah.
the Finnish Kalevala or Beowulf, these works from the Middle Ages that come down to us. And my metaphor is, from the title you would get this, of ruins. They come down to us damaged. Even if the manuscript isn't physically damaged, it's culturally damaged. So we don't know the references that people are making, and they're not natural to us, and there are things that don't even, like, what does that word mean, or what is that person's name there, that clearly everyone must have known, or
Yeah.
everyone in the author's assumed audience would know, the same way that we would, like, probably not mention, oh well, the capital of the United States is in Washington, DC. Like, it would actually be weird if you brought that up in casual
Yeah. Yeah.
conversation. So they give this sense, and I think he set out to try to capture that. And he wasn't the first to try to capture it. Like, Walter Scott with Ivanhoe, and he's like, okay, I have to write in the same kind of dialogue form that people spoke back
Yeah.
then. So that was his experiment, and it worked well enough. People loved the books. Were moved by them. And then you look at, like, William Morris, and William
Yeah.
Morris, like, I want to make things medieval. Oh, okay, well, they have to be this mix of poetry and prose, and they should be romance, and and that's, Tolkien even says something like Morris with, like, chunks of poetry in between
Yeah.
the prose, because Morris seemingly, I mean, Morris used modern or, like, Victorian forms, but he still felt like there needed to be poetry. It couldn't just be, a prose story, because that's not what they would have had. Um, and then Rider Haggard, that, if that's one of my little mini
Yeah.
discoveries or whatever, was that Rider Haggard's Eric Bright Eyes, where Haggard obviously read a bunch of translations of Old Norse sagas, was really taken by it, and wanted to reproduce it for people who read modern English prose only. And a lot of it failed, or is awkward, or doesn't work. But he got
Yeah.
some things again.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I think Tolkien was, I show in the book, like, Tolkien's trying to copy this approach, or he's trying to copy the Morris, he's trying to copy uh, Haggard, and then he gives up on those, because it wasn't working. And what I
Yeah.
think he discovered almost originally by accident, but then leveraged it, was the key characteristic, the thing that gives that in the air, is not the content. It's not,
No.
or it's not even speaking in the old language. It's this, what I would call, this sense of textuality, of heterotextuality, that
Yeah.
there's more than one text going on here. This thing's been put together, but it has editors, it has scribes, it has translators, and I think that's what gives the Lord of the Rings a feel. Now, I finally came up with a term for that. Unfortunately, like 2 weeks ago, and so the book's already coming out. But
No.
there's an essay by Roland Barthes that I read in undergrad, called "The Grain of the Voice," and he talks about, like, how maybe an opera singer with a perfectly pure tone is not as enjoyable to listen to as someone who has some kind of individuality, some
Yeah.
different, so that you can recognize their voice as them. And he calls it grain, like wood grain. Um, and I think that
Okay.
that's exactly right. Like, that, what Tolkien got was to create something that has this wood grain to it, when so much other derivative fantasy is plastic. It has no grain. It's
Yeah.
perfectly smooth. It's like,
Oh
it's
yeah. It
very
looks good.
nice, and
Yeah.
well extruded, and it'll do what, do the job it's supposed to do. But we
Yeah.
value that uniqueness and the seeming. And I say, like, you could look at every bit of grain as an imperfection, because there's a knot hole, there's a wavy bit that isn't,
Yeah.
going to cut perfectly well. But in fact, that's why we love it, because it is alive and, organic, and all those terms, which is very much how the Lord of the Rings in particular works, right? It feels that, like, that it just makes sense where each chapter break is. It makes sense where, the books change, or who's the focal character. All of it just feels right. Like, I can't think of a place in the Lord of the Rings where you go, ooh, why are we getting, from this point of view? Even, and you were a big defender of the talking fox. I remember very much. I'm coming around on the talking
I
fox.
heard about it. I heard about it.
I have always been upset about the talking fox,
Yep.
and I'm coming around, because if we really believe, like, we follow the conceit, if you want to call it, that this
Yeah.
is, the Red Book of West March, and then it gets translated and updated, right? Then that would be in the section that Bilbo primarily wrote after having the other hop. When they got to Rivendell, it says they gave them told their story, and I tried to make some notes and everything. And
Yep.
so Bilbo, who wrote The Hobbit as a children's story, is, writing the chapters 1 through
Yeah.
12, or actually, if you want to go through book 2, chapters 1 and 2 there also,
Yeah.
as, influenced by his point of view and his style. So sure, he would
The
have
fox.
done that, like, just like to have the trolls talking purse, or the other little bits in the Hobbit
Yeah.
that never get. Stone giants were out that nobody ever hears of again. And so I think that, like, or the fact that someone can knock a head off a goblin and it can fit down a rabbit hole.
Golf
It's a great
fumble.
story.
It is a great story, and it explains a lot why people play golf.
And
That's one of those
I have a
awesome
tidbit
stories.
about this that I wasn't able to put in the book.
Yeah.
Um, I was trying to figure out why he might have been thinking about golf, right? Because, like, Tolkien and Lewis didn't play or anything.
Nah.
Well, it turns out that the word golf is etymology unknown. And my guess is that Tolkien had looked
Tolkien.
that up at one time, be like, etymology unknown, needs a story. Because remember, he was willing to take the name Fingolfin, one of his best heroic princes of the elves, and give it to some random goblin king,
Yeah.
right? Because he wanted a golf joke in there. And
Yeah.
and so I think that it was, this is not the first time. Like, burglar, is the first time burglar appears in English is in Simone Darden's edition of The Life and the Passion of Saint Juliana. Like, there's so many times like that where it's clear he looked up the word, or he,
Yeah.
thought about what could this mean? What is this story? Like, the famous light elves, dark elves, the
Yeah.
Svartalfar, right? Where Jacob Grimm's
Yeah.
like, well, they're just dwarves. And Tolkien's like, really? They're just dwarves? Well, maybe people
Mm-hmm.
think that because he hangs out with the dwarves.
Yeah.
I love that aspect of, especially because as a medievalist, I can I can see where he got it from, like why
Yeah.
he did it, where he came from. Even though I could never have the creativity to be able to come up with a story that's so good. The story is probably
Yeah.
better than whatever the original truth was. Um,
Yeah.
just because it engages with so many, like Eol and the Dark Elf and all the things that
Yeah.
spawn from that. And it
Yeah.
probably was just like, oh, I don't know, they're elves, but they're kind of like, they have dark hair. I don't know, like, it wasn't as big a deal, maybe
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
them.
No, the thing is that I told you that I basically just half an hour before we started this recording, I finished your book, and I obviously a lot of people these days are trying to make Tolkien their own for whatever reasons. And let's not try to go into ideology here, but there are people who think you have to read Tolkien, let's say, as a fantasy author, or you have to read him as an Oxford Don, like an English Don, or you have to read it as a Christian, like a Roman Catholic
Hmm.
Christian. But I think, I know you, and I've known you for many years, and I really love and appreciate Thomas Honegger. I think that the medievalist approach to understanding Tolkien is really a very, very fruitful approach, because the concept of heterotextuality, where all this material is there, all the different things, it really, sometimes it sounds like a medieval scholar going through a bunch of manuscripts somewhere in Oxford or Cambridge or the States or wherever you're working on, and he has to make sense of the different copyists, the original text. Is there an original text? Is there one author? How many authors are there? All of these elements that come when if we want to use the word truth again, is what is the true story or on the true voice in the thing that I'm trying to annotate, to edit, to put out, to publish, and bring it to you. And then you have a mind that is incredibly creative, or incredibly silly, because he has these stupid, silly linguistic puns everywhere you go.
Mm-hmm.
And you go like, it's not possible. The man has one of the most prestigious chairs in all of the English-speaking world. He's published on all sorts of medieval topics. He's an incredibly successful writer, but he's still, the best thing he can do is like sitting there with his pipe and coming up with a stupid thing like smugan or smaug, something squeezing through a hole and giving that to a dragon because that's how it works, because it's funny.
Or even like his real, like that he came across, he had the last name, I actually knew someone also, like, like high school or something, whose last name was Bulger. I mean, Fatty Bulger, because he bulges when he's like,
Yeah.
that him and Lewis like had a great laugh over that. And or with any like of the little at the puns, or the the Odo, proud foot proud feet, illustrating a linguistic the loss of the strong plural, and the difference between like members of a family and actual separate feet, and just like so many things like that he had so much like fun with it. There's so much like joy. But also I think that the key thing is here is that if you're a medievalist, or I'm sure if you're a classics person too, you really know viscerally that what we think of as history is of what really happened is through a glass darkly, is that you really even if you have annals and written down, then the archaeologists show up and they're like, well, that can't be true because that battle happened 6 years after that was written. And so like that then like enables him to create a text that does the same thing. The text says things like, more cannot be said of this matter, or no one knows when, like, you're the author, dude, like you're God, you can make that happen. Except of course that the other thing is he treated his own work like something he'd inherited. So instead of like, so I know when we edited the final synoptic chronology for Tolkien Studies 19, right? He ended up with a real problem in that I lost a day. Like he's trying to synchronize Frodo, and because he wants this scene, right, where Frodo sees the moon from Henneth Anun, and Pippin sees the moon, and it's the same moon, and they're so he's like, I lost, he says to Christopher, I lost a day, I'm not sure what to do, and he's got to go back, and he's like, okay, I can add an extra day of Entmoot, because who would be surprised if that took an extra day, and we can do this. But I mean, the easier answer would be like, one, like George R.R. Martin, is just ignore it. Oh, well, winter was 7 months that year, I guess. And, or you can just, change the landscape and say, oh, it's actually closer together than I said, or further apart. But no, he treats these things as if they are evidence, and you can't just throw out the evidence. You have to understand the evidence, and that I think is the the medievalist, and more importantly the textual philologist way of looking at things. We really don't want to just ignore or throw away anything because we have so little evidence, and that I think that it's a little different than historians who are sometimes like, oh, that's just propaganda, ignore it. He's just making stuff like Tacitus, he knows nothing about the Germans. He's never been there. Don't let him describe Denmark. Forget it. Whereas, in literature, it's all still literature. So we're trying to figure out, how does Nerthus end up being Njorthr in and the god of the sea rather than the goddess of the bog or something. And like, so that's,
Yeah,
yeah. I think it's the I think that's his mentality, uh, of in that training. And then you could make the same things, and you can leave things out, or you can say, no one knows what happened to Shelob. Um, I mean, I don't think that he was setting this up to be sequels, though there are possibilities there. I always point out that he says that the Lord of the Nazgul did not trouble anyone in that age of the world, which what lasted for another 8 months, or another year and a half, or depending on how you calculate it. If
yeah, yeah,
so technically, you know, I tried to do that in undergrad. I was going to write a novel from the point of view of the Lord of the Nazgul.
how
Um,
cool.
no, it was not. It was terrible. It was so bad because I was under the delusion that what you need to do is write like a 20th century creative writing student, but within the fantasy
Oh,
realm. Yeah,
yeah.
it was the most horrible clash it's just like awful. Um, that's not going to work. Magical realism. First of all, I think you have to be Latin American to pull it off,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
second of all, that's its own thing, and it doesn't have Lords of the Nazgul and Black Numenorians and that kind of stuff. So it was a terrible. It was a total train wreck. I think I got like 8 pages into it and was like, oh, forget this.
Nah,
It's hard. I don't even know
that's not
where to
gonna
find
work.
it now. So
That's one of the things I'm really really sad about is we used to have a German video game studio that came up with Gollum 2-3 years ago,
mhm.
which was voted obviously the worst game of the year. Quite understandably, it is absolutely horrendous. The story of how the game was made, or rather not really made, is a legend of its own. But what I would have loved to see is they have written, as far as I know, they have written a great background story. So we would have seen the inside of Barad-dûr, and we would have seen all the middle management people working at Barad-dûr, to keep things running. And to imagine that sort of like business logistics, do we have enough paper for any of Sauron's scribblings, or do
Oh,
we
I
have
mean,
enough hay?
you know that everyone in Barad-dûr is having to fill out TPS reports all the time, no matter what they did. It's going to be like the most bureaucratic hell
Yeah,
ever. Even though that
absolutely.
what they're going to fill out reports about is we tortured 37 people today, but our metric is yes,
That would have been just, the
it would have been
idea
kind of
was so
funny.
it would have been absolutely funny. And the thing is, you know how people are. They run around are really hectic because you have to look busy. Otherwise, the guy above you will ask you why
Hmm.
aren't you working, and then you have to fill out all these forms, and then something along the way is going to break. You don't know what's going to break. Either it's the people, or it's like the next floor, or I don't know. The horses are not being fed, and the fell beasts
Oh,
aren't
just think
happy.
about it. That Shagrat gets out of the Tower of Kirith Ungol. He's
Yeah,
got the mail shirt and the cloak, and he has to walk to Barad-dûr. He
Barad-dûr,
gets
yeah,
no help. No one puts him on a horse, or gets a Nazgul to pick him up. And he
yeah,
finally gets there, and then it says he's immediately executed.
yeah.
So like they couldn't even ask him any questions about what the hell happened, Shagrat. He say he doesn't. I assume doesn't even get to say like we left him in the top of the tower.
Bureaucratic efficiency. There you
Hmm.
go. That is one of the things that I don't write fan fiction in the sense, but that is definitely one of those short stories that I would love to write one day,
Hmm.
just to figure out how it actually works, the inner workings of Barad-dûr. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's
Gothmog, the lieutenant of Barad-dûr, and you could go to his office and see the piles of paperwork and the all the bureaucratic infighting that would be going on. And yeah, I mean, really, Lewis gets at it with screw tape
oh
letters.
yeah,
I
true,
think
true. He
in
does
its
a
own.
little,
It's
yeah,
not in Middle Earth, obviously, but its own
yeah,
view of
yeah.
the bureaucracy of hell. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not really sure how we got here, but that's one of those things that I really love about talking to people so
Mhm.
knowledgeable not only about Tolkien, but because Tolkien in itself, the stories that he writes, but obviously the work he's been doing academically, professionally, goes out into different fields of research, not just
Mhm.
medievalism, but also many other pieces of research that where people will just find an interest. It might be interesting for archaeologists, it might be interesting to theologians, sociological research, and everything is there
Mhm.
with modern fan fiction. I mean, with AO3 and all the other huge deposits of wonderful stories that are being written while we are speaking here. You can do research on this. The possibilities are more or less endless. But what I love about it, first of all, the title of your book is something that is really close to my heart, because obviously it's an allusion to the unfair stories. There's a very important essay that Tolkien wrote that is, to this very day, to me, completely not fully understandable,
I
but
agree. I
exciting.
agree. I don't understand it. That's why I hardly talked about it, because um, it would have just taken over just trying to understand it, much less apply it. I will say Giuseppe Pezzini's new book
Yeah,
is sort of an extended. It's about Tolkien, but it's trying to figure out Tolkien in his own terms
yeah,
using fairy stories, and so that I think is. I mean, it's interesting that we actually he and I talk about a lot of the same things. Like,
yeah,
we talk about the Cats of Queen Beruthiel, we talk about the frame narratives, but
yeah,
from very very different perspectives. I mean, he's a classicist by training, but
yeah,
really that book is a book of like sort of literary philosophy and even
yeah,
literary theology. And
yeah,
I've always seen myself as a literary historian, so
yeah,
I'm more trying to explain, like, how did this come about from these various pieces, and then
yeah,
what effects does it have on the readers. And I didn't go into, and I'm glad, because otherwise our books would have been like so much overlap.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, because On Fairy Stories it's beautiful and it's powerful, but it's also very hard to, at least for me, I've never felt that I fully understood it, and so I'm
Yeah.
hesitant to use it and then have my interpretation be wrong, because it's very
Yeah.
poetic. It's an essay, but it's a beautifully written poetic essay as well as an argument.
Yeah. What has always stuck with me is that image of the tower and the elderly gentleman who could, when people come up and destroy it and take it down and find out about the history of
Hmm.
it, and then at the end the line is, but from the top of it he could have, he could see the sea. And this
Hmm.
imagery, this incredibly simple image that Tolkien is creating is, and I have to give you, and I'm really happy that I'm doing the talk with you today, because you can now get full German brownie points for your book, because you are using German terms and words in it, like Gedankenexperiment and Zusammenhang. And obviously, of course, the word is so essential, I think, to understanding and reading Tolkien is Heimweh. The
Which I
pain
gave
of,
years ago. I gave a lecture on this and pronounced it wrong every single time.
how cool.
I pronounced it Heimweh, like way, with a W instead of a
Okay.
V. Um, yeah, I'm still very embarrassed at that. It's been like viewed or downloaded like 38,000 times, and I'm like, oh, just great. My German ancestors are rolling in their graves. Um, but so yeah, Heimweh, is that close
Yeah.
enough? Heimweh.
Heimweh. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Heimweh. Okay, so the vowel is more front than I was doing. Heimweh.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, so I knew that I was going to have to talk about, like, this what is generally classified as nostalgia that's
yeah,
in Tolkien. This sadness over the lost past. But
yeah.
I can't stand the way contemporary academia talks about nostalgia.
Nostalgia. Yeah,
I think they've got it. So no, it's not. That's not fair. They have it right for their very limited sense of it, right? Which is nostalgia in their view, coming from Zizek and Deleuze and Guattari and the literary theorists, is that nostalgia is about a longing for the power that you used to have, or that your ethnic group or your society used to have,
yeah,
and so
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you project back on the past, that one, you make it that you would have been powerful,
The
and
golden
that's what you
age.
care about.
Yeah,
I just don't feel that way about ideology. Like, it doesn't make my heart warm to think
no,
about ideological things. And I thought it was missing something. So originally I wrote, this is one of the things that got cut from the book. I wrote a
yeah,
whole, this is where they get it wrong, and here's this evidence. And then I'm like, it's not going to work. And I
yeah,
just need to use a different word. And
yeah.
when I learned, of course, I looked up the etymology of nostalgia, and that it was actually a Greek translation of a German word, and that it was a documented sickness. Like there's a
Yeah.
1600s medical treatise, which my favorite part in it is, well, how do you know if they've really got Heimweh? And the answer is you bring them home and they get better.
Yeah.
If they die, then they didn't have it. And
No.
if they're away from home and they get better, then they didn't have it. Though I love it. You could try, if you can't bring them home, you could try mercury or bleeding
Yeah.
to cure it. But it was thought to be a homesickness, a
Yeah.
pain for the lost home that was so
Yeah.
severe. It was also supposed to be that the Swiss people were most
Yeah. Yeah.
susceptible. The Swiss, they really take them out of Switzerland, they're going to get sick. They need to go back
True.
home.
True.
And I'm sure, by the way, I'm sure there is ideology involved in all of this,
Yeah.
but that's not what's central to it. Because I think what's central is it's a feeling that every human being has, and
Yeah.
I'll make that extreme claim. Even if you had a horrible childhood, even an abused childhood, there are
Yeah.
things in the past that you wish weren't gone. There are
Yeah.
people, there are yourself, has changed, and so there is a longing for the past. And I think it's an incredibly powerful kind of pain, exactly because it's impossible to do anything about it. You can't,
Exactly.
we are stuck. Tolkien talks about, being incarnated, like, a spirit in
Yeah.
a body. Time only flows one direction for us, and we can't do anything about it. And so it is a sense of, the fallen nature of human beings, that we can't have everything that we want, and we're face to face with it. And it was like working on that, and then thinking about the tower, but also the ruin. Because there's ruins all over Middle Earth. I mean,
Yeah.
they need a building code as much as they need, a king in Gondor.
Yeah.
But like, I was thinking about this. I was actually at Whitby, and looking at the ruins there that Tolkien sketched of the abbey, and I was realizing, like, it is a double sense, because on the one hand, the ruin itself is beautiful, and I don't look at it and immediately construct, the beautiful tower. Like, my original thought was, how do you make a ruin? Well, start with a tower. That's not what Tolkien did.
Mm.
And that's not, yeah, sure, but that's not how you do it. It's that time took care of all that. And so the ruin itself is beautiful, but it's also this marker of loss. But then again, the other part of the paradox is it's more permanent than the tower was. Like the monastery the priory that stood at Whitby
Yeah.
was built it's built by Norman Masons in the 13, so it's in like the 1300s.
Yeah.
Henry VIII dissolves it in 1539. So that's only like 2 centuries, 2.5. It's been a ruin longer than it was a tower, and it's going to be a ruin even longer, because
Yeah.
even if the stones all fell down, who's going to haul them away from there? Who's going to remove all that? It's very rare that that happens, and so like the ruin is got more permanence. And it made me think of one of the passages in the Silmarillion that's really meaningful to me, is when Hurin is staying behind and defending at the Fen of Sirach, right?
Yeah.
He keeps swinging his axe. He's the only one left, and the troll guard of Gothmog, their blood smoked on the axe blade,
Yeah.
and he 50 times he yelled and he cried, day will come again, day will come again. But eventually they took him,
Yeah.
they took him to Angband, and Morgoth curses him, and all this stuff. But what I, even at the very first time I read it, though I didn't have it articulated, Hurin wins, because
Yeah.
7,000 years later or 10,000 years later, people are still telling Hurin's story. The
Yeah.
ruin is still there. And Morgoth, like, yeah, okay, Morgoth, we know who Morgoth was, but whatever pleasure Morgoth got out of torturing Hurin, Morgoth loses on that,
Yeah.
and Hurin wins. But it's a tragic win. It's just, because his family is destroyed, his children are dead. Then
Yeah.
his wife dies, and he dies, um, and he's also like personally responsible for destroying 3 secret elf
Yeah.
kingdoms, which is a record.
That is incredible. That's really a feat.
I mean, Morgoth wishes he could do that. Like that Hurin was way better. But in seriousness, like that, we have this, we live in this world with this sense of sorrow, and it's there throughout the Lord of the Rings, and it's particularly strong at the ending. And so this is also where I'm like, did you people read the same book as me? When they're like, oh, the thing about the Lord of the Rings is just this happy ending where all the good guys win, the bad guys lose, and there's really no,
No.
like, I'm like, Edwin Muir, you mentioned Scouring of the Shire. You must have finished the book. How could you possibly think this way? Like,
Yeah.
how could anyone read it? I mean, the last line of the book, Ursula Le Guin says it's the most heartbreaking line in fantasy literature. But what is it? I'm back. He's got
Yeah.
his baby daughter on his lap in his home with the wife that he loves, and yet all we can realize is that, like, how much he misses Frodo and how heartbroken he is,
Yeah.
but he still has to go on. He can't go backwards. He can only, live life the way. And I mean, Sam's amazing, right? He fathers 13 children and colonizes you know, the West March.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it also Tolkien says, but probably when Sam reached the end of his natural life,
Yeah.
he would be allowed to get on a ship and go to the Blessed Land, and probably Frodo was still alive, so he could see him one more time before they both died. I mean, that's a little comfort, but
It
it's
is.
but it's still also like the emotion that we're left with is
Yeah.
of how many beautiful things have been lost and destroyed, how they had to be sacrificed. I mean, Edwin Muir again says that Lorien doesn't have to give up any of its numinous beauty, and I'm like, actually, it has to give up all its numinous beauty because the ring
Yes.
doesn't work anymore.
Yep.
So it's and I mean, Tolkien talks about that in on
Yeah.
fairy stories, right? Like that's where what I got to at the end, which was a total serendipitous thing. Like I'd actually written the end as well as I could write it,
Yeah.
and then I picked up on fairy stories to get some page numbers for somebody's Tolkien Studies article. And it happened to flip open to that last page with the Black Bull of Norroway story, which I hadn't even remember. I had to look up what it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
So that was like weird serendipity. But what he says there is that the whole unexpected happy ending is the joy of fairy stories.
Yeah.
Where the horns of Rohan come. I'd given a talk at a moot or something a few years ago, and the theme was the Battle of Malden. So the
Yeah.
famous lines at the end: "The heart must be harder, the spirit stronger, the will
Yeah.
more resolute, while our strength weakens." And I said, the in fantasy, the soldiers say those words and then they win. In reality, they said those words and then
And the
they
law.
died. And
Yeah.
that's the horns of Rohan, or the eagles are coming. And on fairy stories is essentially a way of Tolkien saying that is not intrinsically inferior to a tragedy.
No.
That in fact doing it well is maybe harder, because the tragedy is sort of like the natural structure of our world. If you wait long enough, there's always going to be a tragedy somewhere. Um,
Yeah.
if only because we're all incarnate in time, that there will be some kind of end. But it's that happy ending, and the happy ending that you can believe within the story, right? The horns of
Yeah.
Rohan come. We're not like, oh come on, really? Right when the black come, like
Yeah.
he's done the timing so perfectly that it all makes sense. It can be both surprising and completely comprehensible there because of the previous chapters. So I think that excuse me, like that's I think another really important
Yeah.
element in Tolkien's work, that what the ruin represents, that it's loss and permanence and persistence together. And the real key is that it's together and it's been preserved because it is beautiful. And I don't apologize for that either. I've had people say like, "Oh, just you talk about beauty. What about just say stimulating?" And I'm like, "No, no, no, beauty, because beauty's the hardest."
Yeah,
Anyone can make something that's stimulating or scary or ugly or frightening. I mean, and people can, things like that can really move you.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
If beauty's the hardest, it's the rarest. It's, because again, you don't make something beautiful just by describing a beautiful thing. You don't make a
That's not.
beautiful artwork by copying something beautiful. It's something qualitatively different. And then Tolkien, obviously believes that it's got a religious interpretation.
Sure, yeah.
That it's the spirit, the spirit of how things should be and maybe can eventually be sort of shining through in those moments. So yeah, I don't
It's
apologize for the beauty part either. That's
you
not.
have.
I'm old enough. I don't care. Like I think it's right. I'm not. I don't. Whatever the mainstream or the field, the
Yeah.
outside literary studies thinks really affects me not at all. So
The thing that I really appreciated is that, yeah, I don't want to go into. I mentioned it once or twice. People sort of like misreading, misunderstanding. I don't know, not really getting Tolkien. That's not a technical term. That's not terminology. But the thing is that obviously someone using the fascist playbook wants to come back with that golden age. Times when we go back, when things were better, when the people were nicer, when the country was lovelier, whatever you want to call it. And trying to think or trying to argue that Tolkien is a proponent of that very concept, of this very idea, and that just does not work. Tolkien
well,
fully
because
realizes is that time is gone, chances are gone, people have died, loss and grief has happened, and the question really is, how do we move on? How do we
Mhm.
deal with
and
this?
that's why
Because we
the
have
elves
to.
that's why the elves are in danger, in peril of being destroyed by Sauron. Right? I mean, I love Lothlorien. I love
Yeah,
Rivendell,
yeah,
but he's saying, and it's very hard to wrap our heads around this, that using the Elven Ring's power to create those places was a flaw, was a big character flaw. It was wrong. It
yeah,
enslaved them to Sauron. And I mean, he describes it as like they don't grow, they don't develop. It's like if you only reread your favorite chapter in a book and didn't,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
his metaphor. I think it's even more the sense, like, which he doesn't ever explicitly say, is that Middle Earth has a massive fertility crisis. There's no kids. There's no,
Yeah.
and that's what you lack if you live in the golden age past, because
Yeah.
the very act of creating the next generation and taking something that you have and giving it to them changes the golden age for you. It has to be changed because there's new people
Yeah.
coming into it.
New
And
ideas. Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with like looking at things in the past and finding out the stuff that worked better than the stuff we're doing now. But to
True.
think that we can, I mean, and Tolkien even says you can't get back to the Garden of Eden.
Nah.
There's an angel with a flaming sword, if you even found it. So you're not going to go back
Yeah.
to whatever that. So where I'm on this is like, I think that, like, without doing the politics so much, there is nothing wrong with looking at any previous era and saying, oh man, I wish we had whatever
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is.
Sure.
But you can't have the whole thing, and you wouldn't like it, and it wouldn't be golden if you had it.
Nah.
Right? Like, people say like, "Oh, you're trying to bring back." Well, if you're trying to bring back this, but you're also going to have cell phones, or you're also going to have indoor plumbing, then you didn't bring back that, because all those pieces are, it's all part of a working culture, and we tend
Yeah.
to, really not think about how interconnected working culture stuff is. I don't
Yeah.
know if you could have a shire, with all the self-respect and everything, and have running indoor plumbing and electricity, because those things,
Yeah.
they change how people behave, they change the economics, they change the value of labor by human hands,
Yeah.
all of those things. So be careful what you wish for also, because I always say to people, you think I would love to live in Lothlorien. What if your job is to empty the
Mm,
chamber pots
yeah. I know.
forever? It's a hereditary monarchy, and everything in the society is stratified. You don't get to move up. and nobody
Yeah.
dies to give you a new spot. Again,
Yeah.
that
Yeah. I
can
know. I
happen
know.
in real life, but I think that that's, important, and the people who,
Yeah.
again, and I said in the book, I don't think Tolkien actually supports any political program, because
Yeah.
his ideals are so, actually, even though they seem very ordinary, they are so far beyond what anything that could happen in a complex society. Tolkien, this will be the most controversial part of the book, I think, when people see that I'm saying that Frodo uses the ring on Gollum and
Yeah.
dominates
True.
Gollum, and I follow Tom Hillman here in saying that the second time he does it outside the Black Gate, he's actually being abusive to
Yeah.
Gollum, which people do not want to hear, and I understand why. And I used to feel that way too. But but I think we can take out of all of that is Tolkien is saying it's wrong to dominate other wills. And it's not wrong because God's watching you, he's going to punish you for doing it.
No. No. No.
You punished yourself by doing it. So, but you tell me, how do you have a society that's more complex than, like, a hunter gatherer tribe, and even not that, where there's not some forcing people to do things against their own will? And so, in that sense, I think everyone can adapt, because they're like, well, of course, we're only going to enforce people to do things against their will when it's important, which is like,
That's a
okay, you're now every political program ever from,
yeah. Yeah.
no, because nobody can live up to that. We can't live up to that in our own, you know, daily interactions. Sometimes we can't live up to that with our own children, and then we terribly regret it when we don't. But on the other hand, if I didn't stop my daughter from picking up and eating that thing on the ground against her will, bad things would have happened. So,
True.
that's what how an ideal works, right? It's not
Yeah.
to be put into play; it's to guide and to and I think that it's just an observation.
Yeah.
Once I recognized that, I started to try to look for it, and yeah, you do disfigure your soul by forcing people to do stuff. But again, I challenge you to get through a week
Yeah.
without some variant, or having it done to you, and sort of, okay. I mean, just little things like, I just don't feel like teaching today. Well, there's a lot of students who are expecting me to come in and teach, and
That's unfortunately how it works. Absolutely, yeah.
Mhm.
But what I really have to say, I mean, we've gone well over an hour, and I think we could talk for hours even more. But what I would like to say, sort of like rounding up things a little, is I knew that this book was coming. There were some rumors, and obviously I've been hoping that more monographs would be coming from you, because I appreciate that Beowulf and the Critics was one of the books that really made me take an interest in possibly doing a dissertation, doing more scholarly work in Middle Earth. And what I wasn't prepared, to be quite honest, is that this is a book that has this is an incredibly, the scholarship is amazing, but it's also incredibly personal. And I have to admit, there are not many scholarly books of that level of quality that can sort of make you cry. And I really appreciate you putting all of these personal elements in the background of your life and your family and all the things that you have gone through in recent years into this, because I think that is also a really essential part of Tolkien's biography. Because
Mm.
he was certainly someone too who had gone through the experience of personal loss, friends, family, mother, father, and all of these things which resonate. And I
Mhm.
think that's one of the things that is so makes Tolkien so lovable and interesting, and still fresh to new modern readers, is the topics of loss and grief. And that is something you also talk
Mhm.
about in the book.
Yeah, I didn't. Well, I mean, I certainly didn't set out to go that direction.
Uh,
Um, but when I did write the proposal for
yeah,
Norton, that was when I'm like, you know what, I can't. It would really feel dishonest not to talk about it that way. It would be like
yeah,
pretending that almost like the most important aspects of the Lord of the Rings didn't exist.
yeah,
Um, and I couldn't do that. And some of it was hard to write because of that, because I'm talking about uh, so that your listeners know, I don't there's not like spoilers or whatever, but we lost our son Mitchell, in June of 2022 to a fentanyl overdose, when he was just turned 18. And I wrote this book in the 23. And so I was, still very much we're still dealing with that. And and I'd lost my dad, um in the January of 20. So the book is dedicated to my father and my son, because also my dad gave me this amazing gift of reading me the Lord of the Rings multiple times. No one's voice, even though I said it middle of the New Jersey accent, but that's the voice I still hear. And then I
Yeah.
read it to my son, a couple, two different, when he was 4 and when he was 7, and we shared that. And I wouldn't say it wasn't like automatically what we reached for, but it was always there. And we always had that. And then I tried to just explain, um, how it all came, everything sort of fit together. One of the things that was really strange in writing it was that, as I said in the end, I kind of had the idea as I was writing it that in the end I was going to be able to say, the most horrible thing I could imagine happening happened, and I was going to say, and Tolkien's work was a consolation. And so that would be
Yeah.
such a nice, neat package, that would say like, oh
Yep.
yeah, the experiential nature just makes it more power. And I wrote those words, and I'm like, I can't say that.
No.
I can't say that. It wasn't true. I have not been consoled, but there was something different. And this is what I was trying to mention about beauty, before, in that the world that Tolkien gives us, in which beauty comes out of catastrophe or disaster. And I during nothing like someone's child dying. I mean, sometimes I guess people would come completely out of nowhere, and that would be horrifying. But for us, we saw problems and tried to stop them, and people wouldn't help, or people didn't understand. And then when we thought we were okay, it wasn't. But in those times, I remember like vividly during the lockdowns and all that other stuff, is remembering that image at the crossroads where there's the statue's head has
Yeah.
been knocked off, and it has a crown of stars, and the sunlight hits it, and Frodo says, "They cannot conquer forever." and
Yep.
and that's what I tried to you try to hold on to. And because that's it, that's beauty coming out of disaster and catastrophe. I mean, you remember, like, the same paragraph, the statue body has been covered with graffiti and scrawls, and
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
big head with a giant eye and a grinning mouth, so it's been deliberately like desecrated and made ugly,
Yes.
and the head's just thrown off in a ditch, and yet they can't conquer forever. And I think there's a lot of that in the Lord of the Rings. And what I finally could maybe get to, or I can hope to get to, is what I think Tolkien was hoping to reach also, is where he says, at the Grey Havens, he said that the tears were blessed and without bitterness. And I think that's all he was. I really do. I think it's all he was asking out of life. Really,
Yeah.
was, could I get to a place, not where I'm happy about everything, not where all the sad things didn't occur, but where I
Yeah.
could just not feel bitter about it, and could weep tears of, because they're not tears of joy, they're tears of parting
No.
and sorrow, but they're accepted. And so that's what I was trying to get to, at the end. And you're not the first person to. I feel bad, kind of like I blindsided people with this scholarly book, and then at the end it gets, um,
Well
you know,
done.
but it is
Yeah.
what I now understand way better. Um, it's weird because over the years I've come to like Ernest Hemingway less and less and less the more I learned about him. But
Mm.
he always used to go on and on about being an honest writer, an honest writer. and he was such an unhonest person too that it was hard to. But now I get it, because it's really hard not to do something to try to make yourself look good in your writing, even in your own mind, right?
Hmm.
That's really, I found that was really hard. But I found that when I let it go, and when I decided, like, I don't care how this makes me look. I just
Yeah.
want to tell the truth of this particular, this, whether it's a story or, an anecdote, or, talking about my reading. And then it's liberating. Not, again, not in like a happy sense, but in like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't have to exactly place the nuance of this word so that nobody thinks I'm a communist or a whatever. I can
Yeah.
just say it, and that was a good feeling. And I have to say, like, that's I had a great editor who let me
Yeah.
do that. Who, because it's weird that a work of scholarship that has, the kind of footnotes and arguments, and inventing a term, heterotextuality, or I think there were some words I shouldn't have used because I didn't pronounce them properly. When we did the audio book, I learned that, like, wow, I've been pronouncing that word wrong my entire scholarly life. I should stop writing it. But that that there's something in there that people might benefit from. And I think that what Dan said something about it is, like, it's the farthest thing you can imagine from being a self-help book. Um, but at the same time, it may be through Tolkien rather than through me, but provide some insights into how you might try to deal with grief and loss. And we've all, like, that's the being human. We're going to have to deal with it. We do have to deal with it. So I don't know. We'll see. The official release is like what, Tuesday. So
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what the reviews uh, say. I have no idea what's coming. No one has, like, given me backdoor communication. Well, I've been asked to write a review of your. So I have no idea what's going to
Yeah.
happen. But it's the best I could do. And I'm glad, and that's what I was worried about it's why the book there was no
Yeah.
Tolkien book for a long time. Is I I don't know how many Tolkien books I have in me, or what. So I wanted this one, I wanted to do it right, and I'm actually pretty satisfied. I wish I'd gotten the grain of the voice thing in, and
Yeah.
there's a couple other tidbits that it came out, but I'm overall, like, reasonably satisfied. I think it
Yeah.
says it says what I think about Tolkien, and that then it's just up to people if they find it helpful or interesting. Um, I don't have to worry about, does it fit some kind of paradigm or something, because I don't care. But I hope
Yeah.
that people might find it useful in whatever way, whether it's useful in understanding Tolkien or understanding themselves, or just something that's a piece of scholarship that's enjoyable to read. I was trying for that too.
I think the tagline "excellent scholarship" that's the next best thing to a self-help book. It's something that needs to be on a shirt or something. That's because that it truly is. But and I love that the concept of truth that you're trying to invoke and you're trying to explaining how heterotextuality, all these elements in the writing process and the concepts work well together. It is one of those things that make Tolkien so believable, so understandable, and so appreciated to this very day. I'm absolutely sure. And it is very much about illness and recovery and grief and loss and all these death, mortality, truly essential human topics. I
Hmm.
mean, sorry, it's just
No,
who
he
we
was
are.
he had felt that the man had a very, very difficult life. I mean, I admire him. I think the more he's one of the rare artists that the more I learn about him, the more I admire
Yeah.
him. Because people say, like, oh, he's really boring. He never did anything. I'm like, oh, well, wait, he didn't abandon his family. He didn't cheat on his wife. He didn't run up huge debts and then, make other people pay for them. He actually taught his classes and, did good work. The biggest thing that you
Yeah.
can come up with him is that he didn't publish as much as he should have with the Oxford chair, but he still taught everything that was required. Like, I
Yep.
think, you're really grasping at straws. Like, apparently he snored a lot when he slept. And like,
Which is a problem. That is a massive
well, I
problem. We
mean,
have to talk about
I've
that.
been told it's a horrible, horrible problem. Um,
Well,
so
if you're a couple and one of you snores, it's an
great.
issue. I can understand that, but
But overall, I mean, I think that that's kind of amazing, right? That he just was a pretty
yeah,
basically good human being who was trying his hardest to to create the vision that he
yeah,
had. And I think the amazing thing is, I think he did it. And I think even at the end, I don't know if he realized how much he had achieved. I mean, I think he knew the Lord of the Rings was good, but he was always like, oh, but it needed the Silmarillion and it needed this. And I don't think he had any idea of what Christopher would accomplish for
no,
him either.
no,
So well, hopefully he knows now and can be pretty satisfied with what he created, because it's a beautiful work of art that has done an immense amount of good for people. And I don't what kind of more legacy, unless you're going to cure cancer, it's pretty much if
yeah,
you're a humanities person, this is about the top.
yeah.
So
When it
so
comes
I'm
to
just
the
happy that
arts,
I was able to kind of live in his head for a while as writing this. That was actually a kind of nice
yeah,
thing. Trying to
yeah.
figure out what he was thinking at these particular moments was that's the fun part of being a literary historian.
I can only tell you for my part. As I said, I finished the book today, and I absolutely loved it. We haven't talked about your pet unicorn,
Clarence.
Clarence. I'm a bit disappointed that no chickens make any appearances anywhere. We should have
Yeah,
talked
I
about
didn't think
those
of the
too.
chickens. Yeah.
Yeah. The wood grain, that is something you have to
Yeah, I
bring up
really wish
in a
I'd come up
talk.
with that.
No, you did a talk, I think, in October for the Tolkien Society when you were over in the UK.
Oh, that was for
Obvi-
Oxford. Yeah, for the Oxford Tolkien group.
yeah. And you need to put that from Roland Barthes with his wood grain. You need to do that into a talk or into an article, whatever
Mhm.
you're willing and able to do at the time. Because it's a lovely and it's a brilliant image. I really love
I
this.
think
But
it really helps. And it's funny because my edit I didn't really push this direction, but my editor very much wanted me to always say, like, if you want to write your own fantasy, you should read Drout's book, because he shows you the tricks. And I guess, but the problem is, the practical advice would be to spend 30 years writing a giant archive of intercollected text that you can then draw on, which is not the advice that people want to hear, right? They
no,
don't want that. um,
no.
produce and have things contradict each other. And I mean, you can obviously imitate it, and like people like Frank Herbert and
Yes.
others figure that out. But yeah, I don't think it's very practical advice. But maybe if it helps you understand your own, what's good about your own work, or it's just really, I don't know. It's I think that what we saw with or at least for me, how disappointed I was by the scripts of Rings of Power, shows how hard it is to write a Tolkienian story and have it
Yep.
feel like a Tolkienian story. Well, The Hobbit, you know much of the three Hobbit movies, kind of the same way. Like,
Yeah.
you could tell when they were off script and doing other things. So I'm a little trepidation about The Hunt for Gollum. But on the other hand, I think Jackson and Philippa Boyens, they can compare the Lord of the Rings movies to the Hobbit movies and try to go with what works. And so maybe
Yeah.
cautiously optimistic there. I hope they don't feel the need to actually, I don't know, bring people in their 70s and have them play people in their 20s. But I don't know how they're going to do that otherwise either. So
Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, trying to copy yourself as an artist after 10 or 20 years, after having done something and then moving on to something completely
mhm.
else and doing other work. And I don't know, I mean, obviously, Jackson was so happy to do the Beatles documentary, which is an amazing piece of
And the
art
World War
and
One documentary, which is incredible. The
absolutely
They
fantastic,
Shall Not Grow Old.
That's one of those things where you can see that obviously he and his team were doing something that really appreciate and love, just like the Lord of the Rings. I mean, I think 2 weeks ago, Weta Workshop did like a huge, was a YouTube video and everything. One of the guys that had been doing the swordsmith work on the film trilogy and all the other films and other works that Jackson and Weta Workshop have been doing, the guy is now going into retirement, and they're talking about how he has done handsmithed, hand worked thousands of swords, real swords, not just
Hmm.
plastic or anything, but things that are heavy to lift, things you cannot beat stuff 100 times in a go because they are heavy. They are
Hmm.
literal weapons. And how he has found two younger gentlemen in with a workshop apprentices who are going to continue his work, to be true to the art that they are representing. And then in the collaborative work, of course, which is film, which is an amazing
Hmm.
medium, if you realize how many voices have to come together that you can make the perfect music.
I think that's why I
And
was so frustrated with the Rings of Power, because they clearly did all the really difficult stuff amazingly, right? The
yes,
stuff that requires the coordination of 100 different artists and
yep,
musicians and camera angles and set and
yep,
yet they just like had the worst script. I mean, I don't know. I had the
yeah,
theory that they that because I joked about this with one of my friends. So since I have almost
yeah,
a complete electronic corpus of everything Tolkien ever wrote at this point,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
right, we could train an AI on that and then have the AI write. I think that's what they did, honestly, and I think that's why you get like these bizarre little phrases. Like the thing that made my head want to explode was, "Well, do you know why a stone sinks?
Oh
Because
God,
it doesn't look up." Like, what did I just hear? Like, why? Why did you do that? How is there not any person in all of the reviews said that is the worst thing that's ever been said? So yeah, but I'm kind of cautiously
yeah, yeah,
optimistic. The biggest thing is to figure out if people can, I say this with my students and with everyone else.
yeah, yeah.
If you can learn from your mistakes instead of doubling down on them, well, first of all, you're ahead of every political leader in the West today,
Well
um,
done.
and two, that's actually what all the great artists did. They tried and they
Yeah.
failed and they failed better the next time. And Tolkien himself, I mean, look at the drafts. Marmaduke Brandybuck. The ring is not
The
very dangerous
names.
if used wisely. Celeborn's name being Teleporno. That's
Hey,
real,
why did you need to mention that? Oh God, I thought I couldn't. Okay, Teleporno is a great name. It is a great name. Seriously.
but not for Celeborn. Um, and so and the point is he fixed all of
Yeah,
those things, right?
yeah,
And all the like he put it out there, he let it sit, he went over it, rewrote it again and again and again, and eventually, I mean, some of the things like the Strider chapter, he rewrote it 6 7 times and
yeah.
pretty completely, and then what's there is perfect. Like it does everything it needs to do, and more. I think like things that you wouldn't expect. That the power of some of this material. Whether it's like, oh, they noticed the wood smoke from Coombe as they were walking past. Like zero to do with the story ever, but it's
But the
there
detail,
and it
the
creates.
detail.
And it's not even like a gratuitous detail because it fits the map. It fits the and just like that was his desire. And I think we see it in like Leaf by Niggle. Like just the thing is, he wanted to create all this beautiful stuff so other people could live in it. That's the message of Leaf by Niggle, right? Like I painted the tree and the forest and the mountains,
Yeah.
and now everyone goes there. And is he jealous? Is he guarding people up? Nope. He's like, I'm
No,
gonna go make some more. And I think that's really the positive side of it, and why we love it so much. Usually
definitely.
at the
Yeah.
end of a project, I hate whatever I've worked on. I have to leave it alone for a while. But I mean, I just like just yesterday, I picked up Unfinished Tales to like check on something for somebody,
Yeah.
and 45 minutes later, I'm like, that concerning Galadriel and Celeborn set of essays is really interesting, and now I'm going to read the footnotes. And yeah,
Oh, thanks for the footnotes. As a Terry Pratchett fan, I am hugely supportive of footnotes particularly when they contain pet unicorns. So thank you.
I had to fight a little bit for the footnotes, but we worked it out, and they even agreed. Like, apparently, the way I did it, where there's some footnotes that are actually at the foot, but then the rest are at the back, um, is very unusual. There's not a lot of precedent for that, but I'm like, I am sure you can do the layout for that. I have total confidence that you can do it both ways, and of course they did. I was like blessed. I had a great copy editor. I've had everyone I've worked with at Norton has been phenomenal. They're all like, they all seem to be like closet Tolkien nerds and want to talk about it and are excited about it. And then they did. I mean, even I think they did a great job on the cover. This was
brilliant. Yeah.
Like the cover that I proposed, and I first was really upset that my editor's like, "Yeah, we're not going to go with that one. We like number 5." And I'm like, "But I don't know. It's just got a picture of him." And then he's like, "Just trust me on this." And he was right. Like, when I saw the full mock-up, I was like, "Okay, I know why you did that now."
I mean, I'm not C.S. Lewis, and I'm not writing a blurb for The Hobbit back in 1937. But if I can trust my own judgment, this book is definitely going to be loved and read by a lot of people. And what you've told me about the editor at Norton, I mean, I know publishers a little bit as a long-time translator. If a book works, if an author works, then, and if it's successful, there's another book sometime.
Well, it's even better because my editor, after he had signed me, got promoted to be editor-in-chief of Norton.
Yes!
That's the first time I've ever had any kind of good. Usually what happens is my editor gets fired, or like the entire Wikipedia division is shut down 4 days before the book is supposed to be.
Oh, no!
There were so many things like that. I've had like so many disasters that way happen. And then it's the opposite. And it's also just, I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough people in publishing to have an opinion. But I think that the people I've come into contact with have just been really nice, genuine, positive, full of energy people, and it's been great to work with them. So yeah, I think they're going to want me to write something else. I don't have any idea what it would be, but that's more interesting. But I should let you go, and I should run also, because I gotta walk some dogs. It's the story of my life. I just walked them constantly.
Dogs, chicken, pet unicorns. And by the way, this is an exclusive for a talk with a Tolkienist. Michael Drout is going to write another book, possibly for Norton. We don't know what it is yet, but there is a book coming.
Okay. Yay! Well, yeah. I mean, I have some ideas, but I don't know. I don't know what the editors will want. I don't know. I'll figure out something, because I actually have enjoyed. With anything and you're in the middle of it, you just wish it could be over. But then when I look back on it, like, no, it was pretty good.
So I'm glad to hear it. It's a great book.
It was great. It was more great having the excuse to chat with you after all these years. And let's not make it be 10 plus years again. And I have never been back to the ancestral homeland, and I need to go back and see. One part of my family came from around Dusseldorf. And my one great-grandmother came from a place called Strem, which is on the Austria-Hungary border in the mountains. So I should probably,
Yeah, or maybe I will participate in one of those lovely tours that you're doing for a scholarly sojourn. Never know. It's definitely worth thinking about.
Awesome.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Michael. Have a good evening.
You too.
See you next time.